Achtung, welcome to episode Fund und Ein of We Have Ways of Making You Talk. Well, actually, you know what? Because there are some episodes I can pretty much recall, but which also leads me to realise there's quite a lot I can't.
Yeah, I know. We've got to be careful not to repeat ourselves, haven't we?
Well, yeah. I mean, judging by the thing that someone posted yesterday of a sort of bingo list of stuff we're likely to say.
I thought that was quite funny.
It was pretty funny. It was also fairly truthful. But there we go. But yes, here we are. And I did enjoy the two we did with about Malta, and really, really interesting to talk to Timmy. Just the idea of finding the eagle. It's just so it's such a what a thing that will be, and you know, like he says, all the other aircraft carrier has been found. So you know,
I would just really recommend anyone who hasn't looked at it already look at underwatermalta.org.
Oh, that site is amazing. Yeah, absolutely.
He's just
incredible.
Sent over some pictures. Actually, he sent pictures of the Hio being blasted.
And
going under. Yeah. So. I'll post that up later.
Yes, underwatermalta.org, isn't it?
Underwatermalta.org, yeah. And it's just incredible photographs of all the stuff that they've.
Now we've got lots to talk about. Let's start off with this. I'll put my glasses on because there's some more Greece to talk about as well. There's
definitely more Greece to talk. We didn't finish it by any stretch.
And I've got
I feel we need to see it through to the end.
I've got a great Alex quote about Greece, which is really, really interesting.
Nice.
Where you can see. Anyway, we'll get to it. So Steve Prince sent this to us. It's from it's an essay by Gerhard Weinberg called "The German Generals and the Outbreak of War, 38 to 39." While imprisoned along with other German generals and admirals after the Second World War, Field Marshal Ritter von Lieb wrote in his diary on the 10th of December 1945, "After the experiences of this war, maybe I should. Let's give it. It's episode 501. After the experiences of this war."
Definitely. That's much better.
Okay. After the experiences of this war, we shall, in view of the enormous numerical superiority of the English fleet, have to give priority in a future naval construction program to U-boats, destroyers, mine layers, above all to the strongest naval air arm in order to be able to search out and destroy the English fleet in its hidden bases. Now, that's
I've got one word to say to that. Duh. Yeah, obviously. I mean, that was so obvious in the late 1930s. It's just extraordinary.
Yes, but also the atom bomb has since been invented. So war, I'm afraid, Field Marshal, has changed. Quite radically. You know, the Labour government scraps the British fleet 2 years. This enormous British fleet 2-3 years later, doesn't it? The whole lot goes to bottom, and they're doing that because they've decided the atom bomb is the future. So this guy is in December of 1945, Germany having been destroyed at this point. I mean, because we've talked about that a lot, haven't we? The spring of 1945, Germany is essentially destroyed, laid waste to. You know, its cities destroyed, its industrial capacity destroyed, its armies ruined. I mean,
well, the point is this is von Bock, right?
No, this is von Lieb.
Von Lieb. Okay, von Lieb.
Yeah.
Okay, so the point is that, yes, because von Bock kills himself, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Or gets killed. The point about this is that he's absolutely right for 1938-39.
Well, exactly.
He's not right for 1945.
Yeah.
But it is, I still think the Z plan, which is the pre-war naval plan, which is to create vast numbers of aircraft carriers, battleships and all the rest of it, which they haven't got a hope of doing at the expense of U-boats, is just one of the most ridiculous and stupid plans that the Nazis invest in. I mean, thank goodness they do, but it's astonishing.
But that's armaments procurement as conspicuous consumption. You know, you an aircraft carrier is shiny, and the public go, "Oh wow, isn't Germany back and vital and powerful?" Rather than, I mean, what
yes,
the essay?
But that's still absolutely bonkers.
Yeah,
you can't see beyond something big. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. But Weinberg goes on in the essay to say, here we see a conservative and generally moderate German military leader so fastened to perceptions of a world which had vanished that he quite automatically assumes that World War II will be followed after an appropriate interval by World War III, in which Germany will fight essentially the same enemies as in the two preceding struggles, but will, of course, attempt to do better by applying the lessons learned in the war that had just ended. I mean, if one of those whose reputation as a sceptic about National Socialism was strong enough for him to be rudely retired in the house cleaning of 4th February 1938 could express himself in the manner quoted after the Second World War, it should be easier to understand how completely a new conflict was thought likely, perhaps assumed inevitable, during the First World War. You see, because we've touched on this before. When you look at all the generals that Liddell Hart and people are talking to after the war, they're all basically saying, well, if only we'd been allowed to do things properly, do things our way, which after all is a sort of echo of the stab in the back idea, isn't it? The politicians let the army down, let the generals down. If only the politicians had just shut up. And in this instance, the politicians aren't, as after the First World War, Jews and socialists, and social democrats, it's Hitler. The generals are going, the fly in the ointment here isn't socialism. It's and judo-Bolshevism or whatever. It's Hitler, right?
Who kept butting in and kind of getting in the way.
Exactly. And I think it's very, very interesting that because like he says, this is a guy who's out of favour in 1938, and even after Germany has been, I mean, what are these guys what's got to happen to them for them to realise?
I mean, what planet are they on? I mean, it's just extraordinary, isn't it?
It is truly extraordinary.
So Gerhard Weinberg, he lives in the States now. He's German, but he's incredibly eminent academic.
Right.
And he's very, very elderly now and much venerated.
Yeah.
And I remember, and he wears little sort of bootstring ties, those kind of American Wild West ones. With a kind of tie, with a shirt buttoned up, and he wears a sort of cowboy shirt.
With a sort of buckle at the top, right?
Yeah. And it's just totally incongruous. Anyway, the first time I got invited to the National World War II Museum conference in New Orleans, I was asked to do a piece on Hitler as a war leader.
Right.
And I thought, God, all these Americans have been over. Well, what do I do? So I decided to do a mnemonic. Right. And I spelt out the word rubbish because I thought, it would be funny because that's a British word and not trash and all the rest of it. So anyway, Gerhard stands up in front of me. Uh-huh. He's on first,
right,
and literally does the most boring talk you've ever heard in your life. It's just like, and then reading from a thing, and everyone's just like, oh, marvelous, he's so eminent. And then I stand up, and it's too late to kind of change it. I've committed to my rubbish mnemonic. It was incredibly embarrassing, I have to say.
What did the second B stand for? R is for what?
Race, I think.
Right.
U is for U-boats, not on a problem.
Yeah.
B, I just can't remember. I'll have it somewhere.
Right.
I'll dig it out. But I thought it was enormously witty and brilliant.
I've just.
And it just, H was hubris, I remember.
Yeah, I've just looked him up in the on the wiki engine, and he was involved in the Hitler Diaries controversy and thought that on balance they were real.
Yeah. Well, his reputation didn't suffer as a result. He's incredibly eminent. His book on the Second World War is literally unreadable. I mean, I'm sure it's brilliant, but it's so dense. It's like this big red paperback, and it's about 1,200 pages of incredibly small writing with truly gargantuan amounts of footnotes.
Yeah,
and it's as dry as the Western Desert.
Right. Well,
but you can't put a price on eminence, can you?
But he makes an excellent point there, though, doesn't he?
He does. Yeah, well, he's a brilliant historian. Don't get me wrong. I'm not dissing him at all. I'm just dissing his writing style. It just could be a bit more fluent. But as a historian, he's obviously deserves his place in the pantheon of Second World War historians. He's a great man. But anyway, it was all very funny.
Well, I'm just wondering what the eyes. Anyway, I'm gonna move away from the rubbish there.
Now we would remember.
That is a very interesting point though, because the accusation that's levelled at the British is when they start the second. The received view is that the British are trying to fight the First World War again, aren't they? And you learn the lessons of you fail to learn the lessons of the war. You just think that the next war you're going to get is be like the last one you fought. But the idea that a German general in 1945 thinks that.
He's still thinking that.
He's still thinking that. Is amazing. It's absolutely amazing. Now
really
you've
is.
got now. If you hear Jim sniffling, by the way, you've got the dreaded COVID, haven't you?
I think I've got COVID. I'm not sure. I haven't got any tests, so I can't actually check.
Right.
But coming back from Greece the other day, there was a guy hacking behind me
that'll do it
in the aircraft. So I'm sure that's it. It's quite annoying to get to Cornwall and then discover you've got it, particularly on my daughter Daisy's birthday yesterday. So that completely kind of threw the whole thing. But what can you do?
Oh no, nightmare!
Just got to sweat it out. But actually, it's a bit worse than last time. I've got that kind of sort of weird COVID brain, where you just feel a bit kind of fuggy. I'm all right when I sit still, but you kind of.
Oh, that's no good. Now, we talked about Greece a fair bit last week, and did we got to what, the end of 1943?
Well, we were in the sort of middle of 1943, weren't we? So we'd done Harling, and then in November 1942, which was kind of strategically great, tactically kind of missed the point, well, rather tactically good, but strategically a waste of time. And then we got on to Operation Animals, which we talked about before, because this was part of the deception plan. Oh my God, and I've seen Operation Mincemeat.
Ah, yes, let's talk about that first.
I must just tell you about that for a few minutes. I actually made some notes on this, because I was getting so irritated. Hold on,
Funnily enough, someone asked me if I'd seen it at the weekend. And I said, well, no, I haven't. And anyway... because we were talking about the stage show, the Operation Mincemeat stage show, which is like a sort of, I think it's a two-hander, or it's four people or something doing the whole story, and it's a musical and all that sort of thing. Apparently, it's very entertaining. I'm told, but obviously you then get into the thing of, well, given it was an untold story, why is there a film from 1957 about it?
Yes, exactly.
I
put. First of all, it wasn't raining on D-Day for Sicily. So there's lots of sort of guys in landing craft with sort of slashing of rain down. It's like, nope.
Bravo.
It was windy, but it wasn't raining. Absolutely no need for a Jewish family to flee Britain in January 1943. I mean, Ewan Montague's wife and children might have moved, but there was no need to. There was, they really cranked that up. It's too dangerous to stay here. Not in January 1943, it isn't.
Yeah.
Churchill wasn't spending his time in the bowels. He sort of goes, it's good to be out of the bowels. It's like, absolutely, just... quit this whole kind of Churchill in a bunker thing. It's just absolute nonsense.
Yeah.
I thought it was the worst depiction of WSC ever, Churchill. I mean,
ever?
Really, really bad. Ever. I thought it was just terrible. I mean,
worse than the comic strip one. Where
oh, well, I don't know about that. But in a kind of, inverted commas, serious film. It was awful. And also, he was completely grey, which, of course, we now know he wasn't.
Yeah.
From that portrait. Way too many cars at Horse Guards. Yeah. Suddenly Chumley starts wearing an RM Commando uniform, which is really weird. I know he's trying to sort of wear it in, but there's other ways of doing it than that. This is the most egregious of all, is that it's the wrong type of Citroen in 49 minutes 51.
Okay, that's the juice. That's the stuff we want to hear. It's the wrong kind of Citroen.
That was really wrong. It's really wrong. You see it in Spain. You see the Citroen going along, and it's a post-war Citroen, not a pre-war Citroen. I mean, it's just a schoolboy. Also, then you have Montague, Ewan Montague's wife writes to Hester, who's this other character, at the the Double X committee office. It's like, what?
Yeah.
That's just not going to happen, is it?
No.
It's supposed to be secret.
Yeah.
Massively overplaying the jeopardy.
Yeah.
And then at the end of it, Jean, who is played by the lovely Kelly MacDonald, she's completely compromised Mincemeat in this particular strand of the film, which I don't think happened in real life, if I remember rightly.
Yeah.
And then it says at the end, I'm going to leave because I'm going to become a secret agent. I think if you just compromised a top secret operation, love, I don't think you're going to be sent or packed off to SOE. The whole thing is also, there's this ludicrously implausible meeting with the commander of Seraph, the submarine.
Yeah.
Which drops it out. So they suddenly go, okay, we obviously need to explain what's going on with Husky now. So they have this meeting, there's a big map, and Montague and Chumley are talking to the commander of Seraph, and they sort of go, well, good luck. This is what's happening here, and this is what's happening here. It's like, what the fuck? I mean, what are you doing there? There's just absolutely no way that would have happened ever.
No, that's that's absurd. That's absolutely really absurd. Really bad. Yeah.
I've put worst scene in film. Then I put, what are they doing praying at night in the office? I mean, once Husky's underway, they'd all go to bed. Job done. You don't sit there all night waiting for teleprinters to come in.
Yeah.
Then when it all goes right, they all clap in that kind of sort of I mean, I always expected to sort of the lone trumpet and kind of sort of Aaron Copland kind of style to kind of kick in.
Ah, fucking hell.
And then at the end of it, Chumley and Colin and Ewan Montague are sitting on the steps outside in Whitehall.
Yeah.
And overlooking St James's Park. And Colin Firth goes, wow, we've saved some lives today. Sorry, mate, I don't think you saved any, frankly. It was pretty awful.
But mind you, Jim,
I quite enjoyed it.
Mind you, I think, given our critical, I know you've been of SOE. Maybe she did go off and join SOE. After all, it's like like a Swiss cheese.
because they were so rubbish. Yeah, that's decidedly possible.
By the way, to go tangential here, although it's because we're talking about SOE and sort of secrets and stuff. One of the listeners, Chris Olivant, he went to the Colonel's talk at We Have Ways Fest and was fascinated by all the bridging stuff because he's an engineer, and so they've been having this rather sweet correspondence going backwards and forwards of stuff, right?
Chris Olivant and the Colonel.
Yeah. Asking about, but basically, they've ended up here. Chris, prior to D-Day, there was a special gathering of intelligence persons from all the services on the top floor of Selfridges, known as the Martians, who collected as much detail as possible, including all those holiday postcards of the beaches and structures like Pegasus Bridge, who wrote it up in int sums and technical briefings. There was also a specialist engineer topographical unit in an Oxford college who looked at resources including water. Inputs were from Photo Recce, the Resistance, SIS, SOE, engineering contractors, academic treatises, and the specialist teams who crawled ashore by night from small craft and miniature subs to measure the beach angles and the bearing capacity of the sand and examine the defences. One, a sapper officer called Scott Bowden, was reputed to develop a relationship with a French girl. That's right. But he got a girlfriend on these missions, and when his boat had done its job on a radar picket on D-Day himself, he went ashore to find her. Sidetracked, he took over a sapper unit on the beach which had lost its CO and made sure they performed their tasks. He was given an MC, having been threatened with a court-martial for abandoning his ship.
That's brilliant.
But one of the points, and he goes on, Mexi was used, I believe, as a sort of technical advice on the structures, such as the bridges and the mulberries, which involved a lot of steel elements. So that's an engineering. I dare say there was a naval engineering service which worked with them on that. For security reasons, I expect they had to advise on a lot of things which were not strictly relevant to D-Day. So it's that thing of they have to do tons of things, so you can't narrow it down to what you're actually studying. So you're studying everything, which I think is really interesting.
Outside the box.
Yeah, exactly. The staffs of the assault divisions like 3rd Div were brought into the picture with just enough time to plan. The bigots, first of all. That's the level of security clearance you get for D-Day. Goodness knows what the cover plan was for the 2 special floating Baileys I was talking about, because they'll have had a cover story for them. The 2 Sapper Field companies rehearsed like mad. Ox and Buck's LI Coup de Man team rehearsed on the County's Weir bridges on the edge of Exeter. And then as a PS, I have a memory of an outrageous dinner night in Scotty's Mess when he commanded an engineer regiment in BAOR. My own CO, who'd served with SOE, now the MC from fighting with the Italian partisans, was very competitive and introduced a special mess game he'd learned from them, which meant we all got very drunk very quickly. The follies of youth. So there you go.
Well, the Scott Bowden MC court-martial palaver, that reminds me of B. Beaumont. Do you know the story?
No, go on.
So B. Beaumont is a legendary fighter pilot, pre-war fighter pilot. Started on biplanes, Hurricanes in Battle of France, got back, 87 Squadron at Exeter for most of the Battle of Britain. Yeah. Total legend. He was the guy who he was testing the TSR-2 back in the 1960s.
Right. Oh, okay.
So he's total legend. Anyway, I was very lucky enough to interview him at some length before he passed away. And he told me this amazing story how it was spring of 1941. He had this girlfriend. And the girlfriend said, rang him up at the station, said, "Oh, so how are we getting to the party tonight?" And he just thought, shit, I've completely forgotten all about it. And he hadn't got a car, so he thought, he said, "So don't worry, just come here at 6 and I'll sort it out." She said, "Well, you're being very mysterious." He said, No, just come at 6, it'll all be fine. So anyway, so she turns up at 6, and in the meantime, he's just having a massive panic and thinking, what am I going to do? And then he thinks, okay, well, I'll just take her in the Hurricane. So he arranges with his ground crew, his fitter and his rigger, to have it all ready. Yeah. So she turns up and goes, "So where's the car?" And he goes, "I haven't got a car, I've got this." Da-da! And points to the Hurricane. She goes, "You must be mad, we can't go in that." And she goes, Yeah, we can, because normally, I sit on a parachute, so I'll just sit on you, it'll be fine. So anyway, they take off. And
was he a big lad?
No, he wasn't. He was not a big lad.
Right.
And
good.
Anyway,
good.
So she had the thrill of her life, and they went off to this party. And they had, you could start your Hurricane again in a field, if you needed to. Yeah. So after the party, they kind of then flew back, and as he landed back down again, he got caught by the station commander, who court-martialed him. Anyway, he got rapped on the knuckles, and they said, okay. And at the court-martial, he got let off. They said, do you know how much it takes to, how expensive it is to train someone like you, and reckless, careless, and extreme, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, then he went back to the station, and the station commander said, "Well, I hope you're suitably chastened by that." And he said, "By the way, this has just come through," and he passed over his envelope, and it was his promotion to squadron leader.
I mean, there's surely a court martials that never were. Like after all, I mean, Wingate, when he got back from the first Chindit expedition, thought that he was going to be court-martialed. He was convinced he was, and then of course wasn't. Was turned into a hero. Anyway, we'll take a brief break, and then we'll come back and try and talk about the thing we said we were going to talk about. Welcome back to We Have Ways of Making You Talk with me, Al Murray, and James Holland, of course, with the sniffles, probably COVID. A hacking cough man on an aeroplane. So that's 150 people have all got it then. If there's a bloke on the, oh God,
he was right behind us though.
Oh God, I'm meant to be going to France tomorrow, though. It looks like France is on fire. Anyway, we talked a bit about Greece last week, and I've been sort of truffle hunting around it. The character that I find really interesting in all this, and the person who gets totally stitched up for telling the truth, is Ben Myers. Eddie Myers. Eddie Myers. Eddie Myers he's so interesting, isn't he? Because
fascinating. Well, the interesting about him is because he's there as when they first go over and do Harling, and that's the kind of first time they're in there. And this is a classic development of operations behind the lines, isn't it? And resistance. It takes exactly the same form as anyone else. It takes a while to get going. People have got to organise themselves. It's not really until kind of latter half of 1942, beginning of 1943 that anything of any substance is taking place. Yeah. So Harling takes place in November 1942, but then they have all these deception plans. Yeah. And he recognises immediately that actually. You've got two lot of resistance movements here, primarily. You've also got three, because you've got ECA as well as LS and EDM. And all of them are united by their kind of, by their lack of, by their republicanism, their lack of any interest in the king. But LS is at heart communist, but not totally communist. And interesting, Stephanos Sarafis, who is a former Greek army commander, ends up being the military commander of LS. Above Aris Vetuotis, the big bearded guy. Yeah. And Sarafis is not a commie at all. But he thinks, okay, LS is the biggest, therefore, the only way we're going to be successful is by pooling resources.
This is what we're going to have to do.
Yes, but at the same time, what Myers and Monty Woodhouse realise, who's his kind of second in command over there in Greece, is that these guys, basically the British are deceiving them. Because they're telling them, yes, Greece is going to be invaded, and they're going along on that lines. And actually, that isn't the case. It's never going to be the case. Yeah. And if you don't invade them, what's the point? Yeah. What's the point of risking your neck killing Germans when you can just sit in the mountains and just sort of, bide your time? Yeah. And make sure that in the post, after the occupation, you've got a little bit of, you've got the political high ground. And Greek
politics is febrile enough that whatever you do is going to feed into that. Myers basically comes to understand what is actually going on in Greece, what the factions all are, who they all represent, and how trying to get them, to work together is going to be very, 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 very difficult. And tells everyone that, and is sacked for his pains. So
yes, I mean, it's really interesting because Monty Woodhouse says Myers and I were the only two in Greece who knew that this operation, this is animals, was simply deception. We had to deceive our allies as well as the enemy in the interest of security. So the guerrilla leaders were also convinced, like the Germans, that the liberation of Greece was planned to take place in 1943. The deception was successful, but the consequences of it were grave. And by that time, by the spring of 1943, there's 10 SOE missions in Greece. And quite often, Elas just saying, no, we're not going to take part of this. So Aris Velitchotis refuses to blow up the Asopos railway viaduct, for example, because he thinks it's too well defended. He just goes, I'm not doing that. So they have to do it all the time. So most of Animals is conducted not by Andartes,
partisans, as it were,
but on the other hand, they did carry out ops, because Elas kills 500 Italians when attacking the Cornevo tunnel in the Salonika, which is part of the Salonika. And that eastern part of mainland Greece is the key bit, really. But in reprisal, the Italians take 118 Greeks from Larissa and shoot them all in the tunnel. So, it's pretty brutal. And then, of course, you have the kind of, in the summer of 1943, you've got this period of extreme danger in Greece because the Italians are about to get out of the war. And the Germans are preparing for that. And so prior to that, they send off the 1st Gebezia division to take over anti-partisan operations. And these guys are kind of tough Eastern Front veterans who have no truck with partisans whatsoever. And they issue, the guidelines they issue is extraordinary. All armed men are basically to be shot on the spot. Villages from where shots have been fired or where armed men have been encountered are to be destroyed, and the male population of these villages to be shot. Elsewhere, all men capable of bearing arms, 16 to 60-year-olds, are to be rounded up. So, on the 16th of August, 1943, men of the 98th Regiment, part of the 1st Gebirge Regiment, they encircle the village of Camino and kill 317 out of the population of 600. And there's not a single guerrilla there, not a single shot has been fired there. There's no German losses in it at all. So in their brief reign of terror between July and August 1943, they destroy 184 villages and execute 1,300 Greeks and 500 Albanians. Just that division alone. And, it becomes very, very clear to Mars at this point that they're losing the grip. And that's when they have this conference in Cairo. And London is sort of going, well, I think we should support the 6th Colonels, who are just a complete waste of space and not interested at all.
Well, and not connected to anything in particular, are they? So you end up with this with the Caserta agreement, basically, don't you? Which is signed by Papandreou, Serafis and Zervas for the Greeks, and Wilson and Macmillan for the Allies. So Jumbo, that's right, Jumbo Wilson, who's in charge. And this is the thing is Myers by this point has been detached from the whole thing, and he's gone back to London, hasn't he? He meets the King, he sees Churchill, he goes to Chequers, and everywhere he goes, he's being blamed for what's going on in Greece. Myers comes home and goes, this is what's going on in Greece, and he's told it's all his fault. And Churchill says he's the chief man who reared the cockatrice brute of Elas. So, because basically you've got some of the Greeks have come in, but the rest aren't interested, or are sworn enemies of the people who've come in. So that you're never going to get them all under one umbrella, which has kind of worked in France, kind of. I mean, what's interesting about this, is this a more successful deception than Operation Mincemeat, Jim?
Well, the point about Operation Mincemeat is just that I've said it before, but the only person it convinces is Hitler. Because if you're a sound, logical military man like von Lieb, for example, then you would know that you couldn't possibly have an invasion of Greece because it's beyond, the range of fighter aircraft. And you can't make an invasion without it. And also, there's very few places in Greece where you can actually land an invasion. It's absolutely crazy. But obviously later on you have the Italian armistice. And Germany's got a massive problem on their hands because they've got, there's 213,000 Italian troops in Greece and Crete. There's 55,000 troops in the Aegean Islands.
Yeah.
There's 108,000 troops in Albania. There's 71,000 in Montenegro. And 225,000 in Croatia, Bosnia, Slovenia and Dalmatia. I mean, that's a hell of a lot of troops. What is that? That's about...
That's a million.
700,000.
Yeah.
That's getting on for 750,000 troops, which the Germans have got to kind of either kind of replace. So what they do is actually they just go, okay, no, we're going to basically maintain the kind of places that are key, so around Athens and that kind of stuff, and Crete, which they think is important. And they come down like a kind of a very, very hard on the Cretan resistance. And of course, there's two lots of Cretan resistance as well. There's the EOK, which is purely Cretan, and then there's Elas as well. So it's all incredibly complicated. And of course, what happens is now there aren't so many Germans around in Greece, and there's no Italians whatsoever. So it then slips into civil war. So the truce that has been put in place is, so suddenly there's some kind of frantic backtracking and some kind of major work that needs to be done to try and persuade them to do this. And this happens in February 1944. Another truce happens. But Elas has been fighting EDES. There's a SOE agent called Lieutenant Hubbard who's killed by Elas. And there's questions about whether the British should withdraw from Greece altogether. I mean, that doesn't happen, but it's amazing. I mean, it's an absolute mess. But there is this truce. And
this is and who's brokering this it's Woodhouse now, isn't it? 'Cause Eddie Myers has gone home. So Woodhouse
Eddie Myers is gone.
Monty Woodhouse is still there doing his bit, but he's very much he also knows how basically the gluing this lot together and trying to come up with something coherent is essentially impossible, doesn't he? And he also knows that the communists are really well organised and and very well motivated and all that sort of stuff. So their security, Woodhouse regards their security as actually truly professional, is what he says, and that they're not chaotic and they're not leaky and engaged in treachery. They're mobilised communists. Although they're a tiny element, they're still they're important because they're well organised, and also they're also a Churchillian bogeyman. So you've got Churchill really, really worried about that as well, isn't he? So as a mix, as a combination, it's London. Well, basically, what's obviously going to happen is Churchill's going to try and come up with a solution that isn't going to work. I mean, that's the unfortunate thing here, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, so what happens? You have this truce in February, end of February, on 29th of February, 1944.
Yeah,
and then EAM, which is the political wing of Elas, which is communist at heart, thinks, okay, what we need to do is we need to attract a broader cross section of people. We need to rule the roost, but we need to attract a wider people. So they then create the Political Committee of National Liberation, the PEA, P-E-E-A, on the 10th of March 1944, and they then call on elections in free Greece, which is quite a lot of it now. Yeah. Because the Germans aren't there anymore.
Yeah.
And EAM clearly win with 1.5 million votes. And obviously, so you've now got these three governments, because you've got the Quisling government, you've got the government in exile, and then you've got the EAM government.
Yeah.
And it's just an absolute mess. So what the EAM are doing, they're being quite clever, because they're trying to they know that not everyone's a communist, but they want to be in charge. Yeah. So come on in, the water's warm.
Yeah.
It's basically what they're saying. You don't want to be bothering with kind of, EDES. You don't want to be doing with ECHA. You don't want to be doing with the kind of, EOK. You just want to kind of be with us. This is the one that's going to get us the kind of, the social reforms you need, the better bus services, the education, all the rest of it. This is what we need to do. And of course, that's so we know exactly what they're trying to do. And they're kind of, ELAS and now PEEA are kind of sort of marking time to have their opportunity. And their opportunity is going to be when the Germans then withdraw.
Yeah.
And everyone knows this is going on and the situation couldn't be more febrile. So the British try and kind of sort of get around that by having another conference in May 1944. And this is the Lebanon Charter is the outcome.
Yeah.
And in a nutshell, this aims to restore law and order throughout Greece once occupation over. And it promises large supplies of food, medicines, all that kind of stuff. But there's no mention of the king. And that is the great big stumbling block.
Yeah.
And that's the thing that Churchill is not prepared to countenance at this stage at all.
Yeah.
And then finally, the Germans begin leaving Crete in October 1944 and also Athens.
Yeah.
So they're pulling out. And what SOE are supposed to do is kind of destroy as many Germans as they can while they're going out and try and get ELAS and EDES to kind of to get involved with with these. But their point of view is we just want rid of them. The last thing we want to do is kind of start fighting them. We just want them to go. What's in it for us? And, they've got a really, really good point. But then Anthony Eden, the British start taking a really close interest in all this because they can see which way it's all going. So Anthony Eden, in August 1944, says, if we are to maintain any political influence in Southeast Europe and, above all, our strategic position in the Eastern Mediterranean after the war, it is essential that Greece should be ruled by a government friendly to us. I regard it as essential that British influence in Greece and the traditional connection between the two countries should be preserved. Now, what they're all thinking at this stage is that that's a monarchy. With free elections and not commies.
Yeah.
But actually, what's starting to get into the rhetoric is, okay, maybe the king should abdicate.
Yeah.
And that will avoid having the commies.
Yeah. 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 I mean, the thing is, though, is the Whitehall, the British government doesn't really know what's going on in Greece, does it?
No.
And, at all. And yet is trying to sort of, I suppose we'd call it nation build now, wouldn't we? Where you try and impose a constitution and it's a constitution that's to your taste and that you hope is to the Greeks' taste. But they don't really know how strong or weak they are in Greece or how much actual influence they can wield. And it's also that thing that the moment you're leaving, no one cares what you think anymore. I mean, you look at how quickly Afghanistan last year. The moment it was obvious that the game was up for the Allies, for the Western Allies or however we're describing the armies in Afghanistan, the moment the game was up. Afghan politics reasserted itself, didn't it? And that's what's going on here. And you have a vacuum, don't you? There are riots. The British are groping around for a solution, aren't they? Or rather, Churchill is, and he's trying to find.
Well, they all are. I think Macmillan is the minister in residence in the Mediterranean. Yeah. And Alexander, who is by this stage the Supreme Allied Commander.
Well, this is what by December. This is what Alex says.
So lots of things happen in December.
Yeah. Well, but this is what Alex says to Churchill on the 15th of December. I am most concerned that you should know exactly what true situation is and what we can do and cannot do. This is my duty. Assuming that Hellas continue to fight, I estimate that it will be possible to clear the Athens-Piraeus area and thereafter to hold it securely. But this will not defeat Hellas and force them to surrender. We are not strong enough to go beyond this and undertake operations on the Greek mainland. It is my opinion that the Greek problem cannot be solved by military measures. The answer must be found in the political field. Finally, I think you know that you can always rely on me to do everything in my power to carry out your wishes, but I earnestly hope that you will be able to find a political solution to the Greek problem, as I am convinced that further military action after we have cleared the Athens-Piraeus area is beyond our present strength. So he's saying, because after all, who ends up in Greece doing crowd control is Second Independent Para Brigade, who are basically everything that's all that's available at that point to the British. One brigade of light infantry, essentially. So what?
Yeah. So this is under General Scobie, and Scobie's an interesting character because he's that sort of classic, kind of slightly abrasive, not very imaginative, kind of lifelong soldier. Twistly moustache. Politics isn't his game, but soldering is, damn it. And he's not really the ideal person, but they do suddenly reinforce. So they by beginning of December, it's kind of 40,000 troops from 4,000.
Yes.
By the end of December, it's 80,000 British troops, including the 46th Midland Division.
Yeah.
And they are, and Scobie, credit where credit's due. He does organise meetings with Stephanos Sarafis and Napoleon Zervas, so kind of the EDES leader. And they have a number of meetings, not least one on the 22nd of November 1944. And Zervas agrees to disband EDES, but Sarafis only agrees to do so once reassurances are made that his men are going to be safe.
Yeah.
So, and he also demands that collaborators should be purged.
Yeah.
And, Scobie can't give those assurances.
No.
So, it's starting to be a bit, the situation is incredibly febrile.
Yeah.
And then on the 2nd of December 1944, there's 5 EAM ministers in the government in exile, which is now not in exile because it's come back over because Athens is liberated in October.
Yeah.
And they resign and call for a general strike and mass demonstrations in Constitution Square at 11 a.m. on the 3rd of December. The government says, no, you can't do that, but they do it anyway. Someone fires a rifle, 12 people get killed, a whole load more get wounded. And it's not, the whole situation isn't cleared up until a kind of, Company of British Paras I'm not quite sure which company it is, but Company of British Paras then comes in and kind of sort of, restores order again.
Yeah.
But clearly it's very, very febrile. And Papandreou, who is the Prime Minister, then offers to resign. And again, Churchill says, no, I'm not going to allow this. And Rex Leeper, who is the ambassador, says, come on, this is not good. And Churchill tells Scobie to use force if he needs to.
Yeah.
He says, do not, however, hesitate to act if you were as if you were in a conquered city where a local rebellion is in progress. We have to hold and dominate Athens. It would be a great thing for you to succeed in this without bloodshed if possible, but also with bloodshed if necessary.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's quite punchy.
Yeah. It was C Company, 4th Parachute Battalion. There you go.
Right. Okay. But by this point, the civil war has started up again because Elas is now attacking EDS in Epirus, which is the northwest.
I mean, you could ask the question: is there anything that actually the British government can do in this set of circumstances? And I think the answer is no.
Well, I think the only thing they could have done is kind of drop the whole kind of the king's got to be back in power thing earlier. Yeah. And I think that would have saved the whole lot of heartache.
But during this fortnight, they basically shift to the idea of a regent, don't they? And basically, the king says there shouldn't be a regent, but the king's away. Papandreou's trying to come up with a solution, isn't he? And the idea is you don't they don't. So they look for a regent, don't they? So they go to Archbishop Damaskinos, who's the Archbishop of Athens.
Yes.
I just think it's such a
but meanwhile,
peculiar thing to do.
One of the reasons why Elas weakens itself is because they're fighting on multiple fronts. So they're fighting EDS in Epirus.
Yeah.
So much so that as Napoleon Zervas's troops are disbanding, they get overwhelmed by the Elas.
Yeah.
And this is Aris Velitutis and his mob. And Monty Woodhouse has to arrange for them to be evacuated by the Royal Navy.
Yeah.
And they do. They get evacuated to Corfu, along with a whole load of troops and thousands of them. And it's quite a major operation. It's not a small undertaking, but they do. But then there's a kind of, it is now clear that Rex Leeper, who's the ambassador, Macmillan, who's the minister in resident in the Mediterranean, and Alexander and Anthony Eden are all going, the time has come for the king to resign. He has to abdicate.
Yeah.
We have to get rid of Papandreou. These are the things that's going to stop the impasse. Let's just do it. And eventually there's a conference in Athens to which Churchill attends, along with Eden, Macmillan, Alexander, French and US ambassadors, and Colonel Popov of the USSR, and of course Archbishop Damaskinos. And at this point, Churchill caves in. He's now on the spot. He's no longer making these decisions from Whitehall. He's actually there in Athens, and he goes, okay, right. So on the 4th of January, General Nikolaos Plastiras, who's a staunch Republican, he's appointed Prime Minister.
Yeah.
Damaskinos takes over as regent, and the king abdicates. And in the meantime, these 80,000 British forces, obviously Elas is absolutely no match for any of them.
Yeah.
Not around the Athens kind of Attica area. And so they're driven out. RAF is bombing their positions. I mean, it's just extraordinary.
Yeah.
And on the 10th of January, Elas finally approached Skopje about a truce. And with, all their conditions have now been met because they're no longer kind of, the king is gone and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And this takes effect on the 15th of January. So this is sort of round 2 of the Civil War finally ends. Yeah. I mean, we've told this in kind of sort of lightning fast fashion. But even so, there's a whole lot, Elas disappear with a whole load of hostages, which kind of about 5,000 of them get executed. So it's a right old mess.
God.
I mean, really is. And Elas mobilises, they're given till the 15th of March 1945 to hand over the weapons. They hand over 49,000 rifles and pistols, 1,412 submachine guns, 713 automatic rifles, 419 MGs, 100 artillery pieces, mortars, radios, and so on.
Yeah.
But that's not enough for kind of 80 to take on 80,000 British troops, obviously.
Yeah.
So they can see which way it's going.
Yeah.
But there are some, and that is it. The situation is saved. Greece isn't going to become communist post-war, or at least not until the Civil War breaks out again from round 3 in March 1946, which then goes on till October 1949. It's actually a horror story. But interesting, Aris Veletutus, he just goes, no, I'm not going to throw in the towel. I'm going to carry on fighting. And he gets ambushed on the 15th of June 1945 by government troops and commits suicide. And the government troops then chop off his head and hang it from a street lamp in Trikala. And actually, if you can see a photo of it, it's quite grim.
It's interesting in a way, isn't it? Because Greece is a relatively modern European country, isn't it? Strictly speaking, when we talk about,
it's part of the Ottoman Empire, isn't it?
Well, exactly. But as your brother,
1829.
as your brother would tell anyone, there is no Greece in the time of ancient Greece, is it? It's a series of city-states and principalities and stuff. And we have this idea of this Churchill's idea of a Greece is more to do with that than it is to do with the modern cobbled together post-independence nationalist conception. I mean, there's the account of Churchill and Eden having to go back to London and tell King George what's happened in Athens is really fantastic. So on the 29th of December, they call him to Downing Street. And Churchill wrote afterwards, this has been a very painful task to me. I had to tell the king that if he did not agree, the matter would be settled without him and that we should recognise the new government instead of him. And he also said that George behaved like a gentleman with the utmost dignity. But the King's private secretary was in an adjoining room at Downing Street and wrote this. I could hear through the door the voices of Churchill and Eden, but particularly the latter, raised in anger at the King. In the middle of this heated argument, the door was flung open and the King stormed out, his face white and taut. In the car as we drove back to the hotel, the King would not trust himself to speak. After recovering his composure, he went back to Downing Street and informed Churchill and Eden that he had no choice but to acquiesce to their demands. Being ourselves resolved.
It just would have solved a whole lot of, if the British had been more compromising earlier on, that whole load could have been saved. I'm absolutely sure of it. I think that was a mistake. But from London, you're thinking monarchy, and you're thinking that for traditional reasons because Britain's a monarchy. Because
and also on
the King George II is related to our own monarchy, and all sorts of personal ties which kind of make it harder to go and get rid of him. But it's clearly a mistake.
Well, and also there's that traditional problem, isn't there, that the people who go off to Greece or wherever, the idea is they've gone native, isn't it? Is and so they come back and say, well, this is much more complicated than you understand, and there's this bloke and there's this chap and this group and the communists might be small, but they're super organised and they're really well motivated and all that, and they're discounted as having he's obviously,
you can't see the wood for the trees.
Can't see the wood for the trees. You've been lent on. You've been well entertained by one group of people you've made friends with, and it's really interesting because Monty Woodhouse is talking about he admires the Tsviras, the communist leader, because you can have an intellectual argument with him that's a satisfying argument, and that the communists are better organised than any of the others, and all this sort of thing, and so regards him, although he's ideologically opposed to him, regards him as a sort of as a well organised and decent chap, and you've got all that going on, and so no wonder. I mean, because Churchill goes, it's a Boxing Day, isn't it? Churchill's in Athens. He comes in what's the name of the ship? I can't remember. Meets Damaskinos, then comes into Athens. They lay the whole deal out on the table, and as they're leaving, the ship's being shelled at one point. So it's another one of those Churchill incidents where he's within the whiff of gun smoke. So he gets his little
within range of musketry.
Exactly, he gets his adventure. But like you say, when he gets there, realizes, oh, actually, I've been getting this quite wrong, and I really haven't had a proper grip on what's been going on.
Yeah. So credit where credit's due. He does kind of,
Well, yeah.
It falls out in the end, but it
faces the reality of it. No, it's the sort of drawn out element where they're, and I rather feel for the SOE guys writing home or going to Cairo, going back to Cairo, and it's also bloody dangerous them doing all this as well. You know, there's one point where Woodhouse has to hide with the communists because his messenger has been compromised, you know, with a direction finding thing, while sending a message. His radio messenger. So he has to go on the run, has to go into hiding. There's another time where he's got pneumonia and he has to go, and his life's in great danger, and they have to hide him and they have to find antibiotics for him and all this sort of stuff. I mean, it's you know, the high drama of these SOE people. Then they get back to Cairo and they're told they're full of shit. It must be it must be incredibly disheartening. And you can see why Myers, when he gets back to London, is bawled out and he's bollocked and he's told he's gone native and all that sort of thing. But he's offering a rational appraisal of what's going on in Greece. I mean, that tension is very, very interesting, isn't it? And is surely an eternal problem. Is sure, you know, when someone goes somewhere and they get a proper grip on the place, they go back to Whitehall and they go, "You've no idea what it's like in Greece, Iraq, Afghanistan, Cairo, wherever."
Yeah. Well, I remember that from when I was in Afghanistan. You know, I remember absolutely clear as day, kind of thinking this is very different from the kind of the Today program and the Times version of what's going on in Afghanistan. It's totally different.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's really, really important to stress though that you know, in these 3 podcasts that we've been doing where we've been touching on Greece's war, we are but scraping the very top of the iceberg. I mean, this is an incredibly complex situation. There's so many different strands of stuff. So, you know, this is nothing more than a kind of like a cursory introduction to what happened. But it is still a kind of, you know, we've kind of laid out the kind of main key events, I suppose.
Yeah. But there we go.
Fascinating though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is endlessly fascinating.
And just one last thing. What about your grandfather though?
Well, he was part of Macmillan's crew, so went on the Damaskinos adventure.
Wow.
So was there.
That's very cool.
Yeah. Wow. And at the conference where they resolved it all.
Yeah.
He spoke Greek. He ended up ambassador to Greece. So in the early 60s, I think.
Wow.
And didn't think much, you know, when the Colonel's government, you know, the government of the Colonels, then, because the Colonels did get a go, didn't they, at one point in Greece? I mean, 20 years later than the British were trying to sort in the 40s. But yeah, he was ambassador to Greece until 67. So that's right. Yeah,
that's quite till 67. That's quite a long time, isn't it?
Yeah, 62 to 67, I think.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I've really enjoyed doing that and doing my little dive. You know, doing our little dive into Greece's war. I must say, it's been fascinating.
No, it's really, really interesting. And the thing is with SOE is you know, mixed results. I do really feel for Myers. I really do. And Woodhouse.
No wonder he wanted to come back and join the 1st Airborne Division.
Well, yeah, and there we go. We've managed to get Arnhem into this, everybody, because Myers is the man who swam the Rhine backwards and forwards.
He's a total lad, isn't he?
He's a superstar, mega legend. The idea that obviously he didn't just go back. You know, he went to a sort of an exciting. I imagine what he would regard as an exciting posting, being CRE of 1st Airborne. But the war career he'd had up to that point when he just became a soldier is absolutely amazing.
Yeah, incredible. And obviously, he was a rather brilliant man as well.
Yeah, I think so. Anyway, that's all we've got time for. We hope you've enjoyed
episode
today's
501.
501st episode of We Have Ways of Making You Talk. And you probably by now realised that there's still plenty more to talk about. If we've managed to do this much war waffle, it's not going to... I mean, we didn't even talk about Black Snow. And, did we? We were going to talk about that?
No. Well, I'm catching up with James Scott in September. I'm seeing him. So yes,
we have a proper read of that. The other thing is, I finished that book about the escape line. It's absolutely amazing. You've got to read it. It's absolutely incredible. Okay. And the archives, there is an evader archive that the French have, the way you can look everyone up and the book gets down to who the traitor, who betrayed it all probably was.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And Charbonnier, Berserk, when he's ambushed, it's not an ambush. There's a truck that's broken down in La Roque and there's Germans guarding it. And as the story goes, as Berserk and his party come through, they go, oh God, it's the Germans. We're going to have to shoot it out. And they probably could have
just gone through.
But who knows?
Amazing.
But it's that's such an interesting book. So close to freedom.
We could do a bit more on that, couldn't we?
Yeah, I think so. Anyway, we will see you all very soon. Thanks very much for listening. Bye-bye.
Cheerio.